Last week, Matt Shively did a brilliant job introducing the book of Proverbs. And this month, we are going to teach our way through the book of Proverbs. He talked about the wisdom of King Solomon. And he left you with this Proverbs challenge, and I want to remind you of it. The challenge is that every day this month, you read a different chapter in the book of Proverbs. There's 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, and there are 31 days in July, and so it's very simple. On the date that you're reading, read that chapter. So today is July 10th. You would read chapter 10. Very good over here. Little slower on this side, but thank you for being with the program. Tomorrow's the 11th. Read chapter 11. So Proverbs is this incredible book of wisdom, and really, it's a culmination of almost the entire Bible, where God shows us the way life is meant to be lived as followers of Jesus Christ, and the way the world is meant to be, and the way things ought to be, and how you ought to be in this world. And there's a wide variety of wisdom that's shared in Proverbs, but there's one theme that keeps coming up over and over again. It's how to handle our possessions and money. Now, I know some of you, I just saw you move a little bit because you went, oh no, this is the once-a-year money talk. And it's just relax. It's just money. That's all it is. Sometimes we make it a bigger deal than it is. But the Bible, I'm pulling this out of Proverbs because not only does Proverbs talk about the issue of possessions and finances a lot, and so we've titled today Financial Wisdom from Proverbs, but the Bible as a whole keeps coming back to the subject. Even Jesus, more than anything else that he taught about money and possessions, because he knew that those things are tightly connected to our soul and to our spirituality. Sometimes we think they're two different realms, and Jesus reminds us that no, that our hearts move towards the things that we treasure. So I have this key idea on the screen this morning. Hopefully it goes home with you. There is a critical connection that exists between our spiritual lives and how we think about and handle our money and possessions. And my hope today is that you can turn to God and say, give me wisdom with my money and my possessions, because I think there's a way to handle them well and there's a way to handle them carelessly. Robert Fulghum, who is an American literary, he writes about sharing the things that we have, because today I want to talk about contentment, I want to talk about generosity, I want to talk about living simply and still surviving, and I want to talk about sharing. Robert Fulghum was a pastor and a literary, and he makes this list, and he writes these things. He writes, first of all, the title, I'm trying to remember, the title is, it's on the next slide, Everything I Learned in Kindergarten, or Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned in Kindergarten, and he writes, these are the things he learned in kindergarten, the life lessons. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours. At 3, you just get in trouble. At 30, that's prison. Okay, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Just a lot of wisdom here. Warm cookies and milk are good for you, especially when you're sad. Draw some and paint some and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon and try to keep your job. When you go out into the world, hold hands and stick together, and then be aware of wonder. But he says, share everything. And I want to start there this morning because we have a hard time sharing. Let's be honest. When we own something we like, we want to hold on to it. We have a very tight grip on money and possessions. I know that because I used to be a college pastor. And I was taking a group of college students to Costa Rica and Cuba. I had a band, musicians, and a soccer team. And we get to O'Hare Airport, we're at the gate, and I see my bass player is having this intense conversation with a gate agent. So I go, hey, what's going on? And he says, she's saying that unless I check my bass guitar, it can't go on the plane. I said, well then, dude, go check the guitar. And he said, no, I'm not going to check my guitar. He says, and it's a bass guitar. He said, it's a $2,000 guitar. And I'm saying, It's just a guitar. I said, so what are you going to do if she says you can't check it? And he said, you're going to have to pry it out of my dead cold fingers. No, he didn't say that. I said, just go check it. He says, I will not check it. I said, well, then what are you going to do? He said, well, then I'll stay at the airport with my guitar. I said, honestly? I said, seriously? We've been preparing for 6 months, and you get to play music in Costa Rica and Cuba, the two most musical places on the planet? And he says, I'm staying. I said, okay, you can stay with your guitar. That was it. I was so annoyed. And so we got on the plane without him. I'm just going to tell you, you couldn't pull that thing out of his hands. Now, somehow, he snuck around her and got on the plane. He got on the plane with the guitar. I don't know how. But that's how we are. We have something, and we don't want to let go. I want to start with this thought. I have 5 lessons that I've pulled out on finances and how we handle them. And the first one is this. Ask God to give you wisdom for dealing with your finances. I think Proverbs is a great place to start in Scripture because it gives us this biblical theology. It's a theology of possessions that we have here. And I think it's the right place to start. And it starts with this, with asking God for His wisdom. Proverbs 3, verse 13. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. For she is more precious than silver, and yields better return than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. So I know we need wisdom because so much of the financial language that we hear today, it tends to be confusing. We hear language like an IRA or an ARM or an APR or a 401k. We hear about diversification and capital gains and compounding interest, and we're not sure what to do about all that. And even now, there's so many apps for your phone that have to do with money. There's Square Cash, there's Venmo, there's Splitter, there's even Snap Cash. Now, Snapchat is the same app that if you send a picture or text, it disappears. I'm not sending my money over that app. Some of you can, but all the power to you. But those are all the things that we're wondering what to do with, and God gives us wisdom for dealing with it. And maybe you have felt desperate or confused. You know that the average American, well, I'll put it, it's 45% say at the end of the month, they have more bills than they do income. At the end of the month, they can't pay. More than half of people say that they can't pay all of their bills at the end of the month. And we need financial wisdom because financial advisors will tell you that every person over the course of their lifetime will make at least one drastically poor financial decision. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but we all have our horror stories, don't we? I know it's true because I have a good friend that lives in Las Vegas, and he was telling me about something he tried to invest in last year. He said he met a guy who said he was a concert promoter, and this guy says, I want you to be my business partner. He says, okay, and he says, because every guy, at least every guy since they were 12, wanted to be a concert promoter. Let's just be straight here. And so this guy says, hey, so the first act I want us to book is Toni Braxton. And I thought, this was last year. I was like, Toni Braxton? She hasn't done music since 1988. Are you serious? So he said, so this new business partner says, I need $15,000 for her to sign the contract for her agent. So he shells out $15,000. All right, a month later, the guy comes back and says, okay, we're going to fill the Thomas and Mack Center. And I told him, I said, with Toni Braxton? I mean, I loved her music back in the 80s, but we're going to get Kenny G to go along with her. What's happening? So he shells out $15,000 more for the Thomas and Mack Center. So that was their plan. They start to promote it. 3 weeks before Toni Braxton is to come, they get an email that she has a cold and she's not coming. That's what he's told. He tries to track down his 30 grand. It's gone. His friend is gone. His partner's gone. His 30 grand is gone. That's why I say, maybe you didn't invest in Toni Braxton, but all of us have made some kind of poor financial decision. If you haven't yet, you certainly will. I say all that to say, God gives wisdom for dealing with our possessions and with money. You know, I think, and I've heard it said, I think it's true, but people, financial experts will say that all of us are born as either savers or spenders. the good news is we can change our patterns, but spenders are the kinds of people who window shop. Spenders go to new car lots just to see the new releases. Spenders are the ones that look at every credit card offer closely. Spenders stay up at 1 a.m., they're watching QVC. Okay, so those are spenders. Savers are the ones that actually look at their bank statements. Savers work really hard to have more income than expenses, even if it's just a little bit at the end of every month. And you go, why does that matter? What is the spiritual significance of that? Because I think having margins in our lives, it's very important. Because if you have no margins, it's impossible to be generous. If everything that comes through your hands you spend and it just leaks through your fingers like water, then how can you ever be generous? And so ask God for wisdom. All right, that's the first lesson. Here's a second lesson from Proverbs, and it's this. Hard work honors God, and he blesses it. The writer of Proverbs gives us this great analogy, this story in Proverbs chapter 6. We read, this is verse 6, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways, and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provision in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands, and poverty will come on you like a thief." Do you see his point here? He is saying, you are called as God's people not to just honor God with your work by working hard, but God blesses the lives of those who work hard. I think sometimes we just simply pray, God bless my work or bless my life, but we don't work hard, and it doesn't work that way. There's this connection in the Bible between how God blesses and rewards our hard work. There's two simple things I would say here. First of all, whatever job, whatever career that you have, whatever job you hold, can I say bust it and hustle? You know, if you look at the people who get promotions and raises in the next opportunity, they're the ones that are taking initiative. They're the ones that are taking on jobs that were not necessarily theirs. They're the ones that are looking to collaborate with coworkers. They're the ones that are starting new things and representing their company well. They get the next opportunity because they work hard and they hustle. The second thing is, I hope you're doing something that you love to do in life. Because life is too short to keep a job for years or decades that you hate. I think we can struggle just as much financially doing something we love as doing something that we don't love doing. And now, don't quit the job you don't love until you first find that job you really love. Don't make that mistake and go through years of unemployment. But can I say, God blesses our hard work, but if you're going to work hard, then it's got to be something that you love doing. I'll keep reading a few more. Proverbs 12:11. He who works his land will have abundant food. Proverbs 14:23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk only leads to poverty. I said that I've seen a connection between how God blesses our lives and how hard or diligent a person works. I've seen this be true my entire life. I have a good friend that I grew up with in Africa. His name is Mark. Mark's parents were missionaries. Mark was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and we left for college together. We went to a Christian college in California, and Mark was one of those college students that never had $1. Most of us didn't have $2, but he didn't even have $1. His roommate and other friends would chip in on his textbooks. When we'd go get burritos at Nago's, he'd say, "Hey, anyone have 65 cents for the bean burrito?" "All right, Mark, you can have 65 cents. That was Mark in college. By his junior year, his parents couldn't keep up with the school fees, and so he had to quit. And he moved back to Chicago. But he got a job at a fund management company called CRT, Chicago Research and Trade, and he was a runner on the floor at the Mercantile Exchange. And in just a few years, he started getting promotion after promotion because do you know why? Mark busted it. He started finishing college, which he did. And then he had to he'd get up every morning at 5 a.m. to get the Northwestern to downtown Chicago. And if he got married young, and his wife would lay out his clothes, we'd say, she's laying out your clothes because you're colorblind. He'd say, I'm not colorblind. He is. And he'd say, she's helping him match. But he says, no, she's helping me be ready, because he would be out the door and catching the train at 5:30. So he's on the floor when the markets open in New York City. This was when he's 23, 24 years old. And you know what? He starts getting promotion after promotion. Soon, he's managing all of their risk. And then CRT, Chicago Research and Trade, gets absorbed by Nations Bank in Charlotte. And so they move him to Charlotte, and he starts to manage their risk management there. And then they said, Mark, we need you in Hong Kong. And so they send him to Hong Kong. And now Nations Bank is acquired by Bank of America. And now he's managing all of B of A's risk in all of Asia. And they say, Mark, we need you in London. And they move him to London. And Mark is managing all of the risk management in Europe for Bank of America. And then they bring him back to New York and they say, we want you to be treasurer, worldwide treasurer of the Bank of America. This is a guy who was a missionary kid born in Addis Ababa that didn't have enough money for a burrito. But because he works hard and hustles and busts it, then God opens the doors. And do you know at the end of the day what Mark is like now? He's one of the most generous people that I know in my life. Because when you work hard and you hustle, you end up with margins and you can share and you can be generous. Lesson 2, hard work honors God and he blesses it. Lesson number 3 I have is God blesses the lives of generous people. So we read about generosity and all in Proverbs a lot. And there's always this contrast between the generous and the stingy. But let me start reading in verse 9 of chapter 3. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Can you go back in this verse and look at these two words? He says, bring your first fruits. This is tithing language. The writer of Proverbs is reminding all of us that we have this responsibility to give back to God first. Not to give God our last and our leftovers, but our first. In the Bible, in general, the principle for tithing is about 10%. Sometimes we think we're generous. The average American Christian tithes about 2%. I think true generosity starts at everything over that 10% mark. And can I say this morning, without getting too far into your kitchen, if this is your church home, if the Grove is your church, then your tithe is needed here because God is using it. You know, this morning we got to dedicate the lives of 7 families, brought their children. That's exceptional. Our children's ministry, if you haven't met our children's ministry staff, I think we have about the finest children's ministry staff in the country. And they're here. We have about 25 employees at the Grove. They're here because of your tithing. Our junior high staff is here because of your tithing. Can I tell you what our 5th and 6th grade ministry did in June? It's led by Matt Shively and Allie Sesmat. But they had, in June, for a week, they had zone days. And that's days spelled with a Z, just so you get it right. On zone days, they had 180 5th and 6th graders, 180 every day for a week here on our campus. God is using your tithe here. The things we do in Africa or Haiti, the things we do through our women's ministry and our men's ministry only happen because of your tithing. So if this is your church home, then I hope you know that what you tithe is critical. Like I said, the Bible makes this important connection between generosity and God's blessing. I'll read you a couple of more verses. This is Proverbs 22, verse 9. The generous will themselves be blessed because they share their food with the poor. Proverbs 11:25. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. Proverbs 19:17. If you help the poor, you're lending to the Lord. How awesome is that? And He'll repay you. Just trust Him with that. Jesus in Acts 20, He says this. He says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. want you to think about that. We think often in life that getting is the best thing. For someone to give something to us, for us to get something for free is the best. And Jesus says, no, it's upside down and backwards. The most fortunate ones, the lucky ones, are the ones who get to give away and give to others and bless the lives of others. When we start to live that way, when we start to live generously, then our lives filled with these exciting stories and people's lives and stories, and we go on this adventure with God. When I came back from Malawi a week and a half ago, I found a friend of mine here at the Greg, and I got to tell him his new story of generosity, because about a year ago, Greg started something that he's calling a house for a home. He had heard that for less than $1,000, you could build a house for a widow or for a single mother in Africa, and he couldn't believe it. He says, well, I want to fund with every sale that his company closes on, he wants to share the profits and build a house. And so he pulled together mortgage brokers and realtors and escrow companies that with every closing, they all contribute just a little bit, and then you have $1,000. Well, when I was in Malawi, I got to see his one of the first 2 houses they built. I have a picture of it here. And meet the widow who had moved into it. And then the story got even better. I said, Greg, the widow who you built the first house for, next picture, here she is with Jennifer, one of our pastors here. And I said, this widow, get this, we had a village-to-village race. It was part of a big sports day Paul Gunther was holding. And his winner for the men's division and the women's division was each 15,000 kwaches. That's a pile of cash. It's only about $25, but 15,000 kwaches sounds like a lot. And it's almost a month's wages. And she won it. I said, Greg, the widow who you built the house for, she won the village-to-village race. I think she's getting a better night's sleep now without the leaking roof and everything. But that's the story. We can applaud. Someone started over here. We're going to applaud the generosity of people here in our own church. Those things are happening. That can be your story. It's not your story yet. That's Greg's story. You'll have your own story. I think faith is tightly connected to issues of generosity. Because if you're truly going to live generously, you're going to have to give to where it scares you. Jesus in Matthew chapter 14, if you know your Bible well, you know that in Matthew 14, he's teaching on the side of a mountain. And he's got 5,000 people listening. His disciples tap him on the shoulder. They say, hey, everybody's hungry. Stop all the preaching. And he says, okay, well, we'll find some food and we'll share it. Well, they come back. And all they have are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish that they took from some small, skinny kid. You know, he has got these big fishermen take his loaves and fish. There's a risk because he gives up his lunch. Will he get it back? And there's several lessons here. I want to point them out to you. The first one is this, is that for something to be blessed, it must first be given away. Think about that. Sometimes I hear Christians say, well, God's not blessing my income. God's not blessing my possessions. And I would ask back, well, have you given it away yet? It can't be blessed till you give it away. That's what happens with this 5 loaves and 2 fish. Number 2, ask God to bless what you give. So the first thing we read in Matthew 14 that Jesus does, listen to this. He takes the loaves of bread into his hands, and he says, we read this 14:19, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Ask God to bless what you give, and he does. And then number 3 is, only what is given away can be multiplied. In the most extravagant, exponential way, it can be multiplied. But it has to be given away first. Lesson number 4, I have a 4th one. Be very careful about debt, the writer of Proverbs says. Listen to this, Proverbs 22, verse 7. The borrower is slave to the lender. And we read that and you go, wow, that's harsh language. But the Old Testament keeps making this connection between borrowing and being in debt and being in slavery, because then if you owe too much, they would make you a slave of that person that you had the debt to. Now, we're just talking about Visa and MasterCard, but maybe you have felt like you're a slave to them. It feels like that sometimes. Financial experts will say There's good debt and there's bad debt. So I'm talking about bad debt when we talk about be very careful about debt. You know, good debt is something like your house, something like a car that when you pay it off, you have something that has some value. Things that are appreciating assets. I'll just say this, tailor-mades are not an appreciating asset. Jimmy Choo is not an appreciating asset. I'm just going to shoot straight here, okay? And Xbox One might be an appreciating asset, but not an Xbox in general. But those things just aren't. If we're honest with ourselves, most of our bad debt, most of our credit card debt comes because we wanted something that we could not afford. And so we promised ourselves, well, I'm going to pay for this, and then I'm going to pay it off at the end of the month. But we can't. And that balance just builds. The average American pays over $1,000 a year just in interest on credit cards. The average American carries $8,562 in credit card debt. Because we get these cards in the mail. My wife gave me it, and you know, they're usually, what happened is I lost my debit card last week, so she hands me this. And it says freedom on it. There's some kind of, the Bible says it's slavery. This one says freedom. I don't want to mention the bank. It doesn't matter what bank it is. But it says chase freedom. And I just, I don't feel that free. And she says it's not a debit card. I'm waiting for mine in the mail. But it's not a credit card. I have to pay it off at the end of the month. I was like, you better. So I'm carrying this for a week. But it's shiny. And it sparkles. And you just want to look at it. It's kind of mesmerizing. We get those in the mail, don't you? And they come in great colors like silver, or even better gold. They come in black. You can even get them with like the Diamondbacks logo on them. When I first moved here, we had just won the World Series. I get the Diamondbacks logo on mine, and I'm not making this up. One of the first times I used this Diamondback card, I put it down, and the guy behind the counter looked at the card, looked at me, he says, "Do you play for the Diamondbacks?" I was like, "How'd you know?" Is that a lie? I was like, thank you for that mistake. So now I'm whipping it out all the time, hoping that happens more. That was a long time ago when I was a little younger. Anyway, but we carry those. And here's the thing about bad debt or credit cards, is that we make several assumptions. One, we assume that our conditions in life will not change. We assume that our salary will not change, our job will not change, that inflation will not change, that our health will not change. We assume that when we take on bad debt. We also assume that God cannot meet my needs. So I'm going to go with plan B. Plan B doesn't always work out so well. There's a battle always going on. There's this tension between the present you and the future you. The present you is the one that takes on the bad debt. The future you is saying, save up so we can be generous. Save up. And the present you, there's this tension between the you today and the you tomorrow. And the you today wants it all now. The you tomorrow is saying, if you keep spending like this, I'm going to end up in a trailer park in Ajo. That's what's going to happen. That's what the future you is saying. And ask God for wisdom as you handle your finances, because that's what happens. Lesson number 5, invest in eternal things. The last lesson that I have here. Proverbs 11, verse 28, we read this. The person who trusts in his wealth will fall, but the righteous will flourish. Jesus, I'll read chapter 23, verse 5. In the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. The writer of Proverbs is constantly contrasting the spiritual you with our physical material desires. Jesus in Luke chapter 12 is teaching, and a man interrupts him, and he says, tell my brother to share. We just received our inheritance. My brother's not sharing. I told you when we started, even 2,000 years ago, we hate to share so much. And so Jesus tells a story. He tells about a man. He says there's a man who had these barns. He was a farmer, and he was very successful. And he filled his barns to where he could hardly shut the doors. And then he thought to himself, what do I do now? Do I give it away? He says, no, I'm going to build bigger barns. So he builds bigger barns, and he fills those barns to capacity. He can't hardly close the doors. And then Jesus says he goes to bed, and that night, he dies. That's the end of the story. It's a really tragic story. The lesson is something like stingy people die young. I don't know what it is. Generous people live longer. No, but really what he's trying to say is treasure eternal things. We're treasuring maybe sometimes the wrong things. He says in Matthew, our heart tends to follow what we treasure. I have this list of comparing and contrasting temporary things versus eternal things. Your list might be different on the left, but I have stuff is temporary. Our influence is temporary. Attractiveness, money is temporary. Resumes come and go. Titles are temporary. GPAs and SAT scores. Youth is very temporary and fleeting. Health is temporary. The opinions of others that we care so much about. But what's eternal? Jesus says, give your life to God. Treasure your soul. Grow a soul that is hungry for God. Love people. Love others. Show compassion. Be generous. All of those things have eternal value. We don't always get that. But money and things do not give us what we always want, which is peace and contentment and happiness and joy. Like I said when we started, the things, money will slip through our fingers so quickly. I've heard it said that our wallets are the temples of the 21st century. And we hold on to them tightly, but you can't. Whatever you try to hold on too tightly to, it will slip out of your fingers. I know that for a fact because it happened to me this week. What happened is my wife and I were going out to visit my son in Irvine, who works at a church there over the 4th. And so I had a check that came in the mail, and I said, hey, Veronica, could you cash it and bring me like $200? Well, she gives me the $200, but she gives me two $100 bills. Big, brand new, crisp. So I fold them carefully. I can't remember when I ever had two $100 bills in my wallet. You know, packing heavy for me is like a 10 spot, okay? I just don't. If I have too much cash in there, the next time my sons go to Cane's or Dutch Bros, they take whatever cash is in there, so I can't carry too much. So I put those in there, two Benjamins, and it felt really good putting it in my pocket. Well, we get to California, and the first time we stopped to eat with my son, she says, and I pull out my debit card. She says, hey, use the cash. Oh, no, it's only $35. I don't want to break it for that. Why would I break it for that? We get ice cream that night. And she's looking at my hundies. And I'm going, no. Hey, just debit card is fine. You know, if we're not going to break it over $8. That was Saturday. Sunday, you know, lattes, $11. I can't break 100 over $11. A debit card again. Electronic money, for some reason, doesn't have the same seduction that two crisp Benjamins do. And I'm not going to lie to you, you feel a little more powerful and in charge when you got those in your pocket. I mean, let's be straight. This sounds so trite. I can't believe I'm sharing it with you, but that's just what I felt. Sunday, I don't spend it. Monday, 4th of July, no way am I breaking that. No way. We get through the whole weekend. I haven't broken either hundy. It's Tuesday morning, 6:30 in the morning. We finally load up. I'm flying back here. We're going through Corona. I go, I need donuts. We pull off the freeway before I leave Cali. I need some donuts. And I look for my wallet, and it's not in my pocket. I said, where's my wallet? She doesn't know. We look through it. We can't find it in the car. I unload the suitcases. We're looking through the suitcases. Can't find my wallet. We call the hotel. Send someone quick before the next dirtbag checks in. You know, somebody's going to take my two hundies. It's not there. I call my son. Get him out of bed. Go look in your parking lot. He can't find it. It's gone. The $200 are gone. I never got to spend one. Some sorry soul in Costa Mesa right now is living large off my two hundies. Forget about the debit card. I didn't care about that. But you know what the problem was? I was trying to hold on. I just kept trying to hold on. And Jesus says, give your heart, give your soul to eternal things. Give your heart to things that will last forever. He says, or you'll end up like the man in his story in Luke chapter 12, who builds these barns, but then he dies. And unfortunately, that day is coming. That day is coming. I hate to say it. I hate to be so crass, but one day, that day will come when you die. For you, I know it's years and decades from now, but that day will come. And you know what's going to happen the day after you die? The day you die, it's going to be a sad day, but the day after you die, I've written this. Your brother-in-law from Des Moines is going to show up, all right? Your brother-in-law from Des Moines is going to start to pull everything that you've treasured out on the front lawn for a yard sale. He's going to go in your garage. He's going to pull out the Callaways and the Cannondale and your DeWalt Sawzall. He's going to pull that out. He's going to go in your kitchen and pull out your Sub-Zero and your Keurig. He's going to even take your precious IKEA couch out there because he doesn't care. He's going to go in your bedroom and he's going to find your Doc Martens and Doc Martens and Steve Maddens, and he's going to put them out there. He's going to find your Tommy Bahama shirt that you've had since the 90s. He's going to put your 65-inch plasma flat screen on the front yard. He's going to sell it all. He doesn't care what it goes for. $10, take it. The next day, whatever doesn't sell, he's putting on Craigslist for $1 each. Because you're gone. It was important to you. It's not important to anybody else. So Jesus says, treasure the things that matter most. Treasure your relationship with God. Pray more. Read your Bible more. Keep worshiping with my people. Love your sons, love your daughters more. Spend more time. Love your husband, love your wife. God puts great friends in your life. Treasure your friends. All of those things are eternal. Give your life to that. That's what matters most. That's what the writers of Proverbs is trying to get us to understand.